So Claire, starting with you then and looking at vaginal symptoms. So as I mentioned, in research conducted by the British Menopause Society, we saw that over a third, around 37% of menopausal women experience vaginal dryness, and menopausal sex is painful. And that's something that people are searching for, women are searching for a lot online. Is this something that you see commonly in your menopause clinic?
No, absolutely. It's super common. And I would say actually that that's a massive underestimation because people often don't volunteer those symptoms. And it's not till you start asking about specific symptoms that people will actually say, yes, I am experiencing that. So, really super common symptoms will be vaginal dryness that people are maybe managing with lubricants, but then the lubricants start to wear off. Prickly feelings around the vulval area, so itching. Often people have been through several rounds of treatment for thrush, thinking that they've got thrush, they've been treated for thrush, and that treatment hasn't worked. During the menopause, we'll talk about causes in a second, but often the vagina loses its stretch, and that's really important at the entrance to the vagina. And so often women will say when you ask that actually it's penetration, it's the first movements during sex that are really painful. And then once you've sort of grinned and bored that bit, it's actually not too bad, which is really depressing, isn't it? So there's a real myriad of symptoms, and sadly, some women who said, well, actually I haven't been able to have sex for 5 years, but I haven't told anybody. So people are embarrassed. I don't know if you saw, there was a study that was published in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago where people just not knowing how to describe their anatomy either. So when people say, oh, I've got an itchy vagina, I've started actually saying, well, what exactly do you mean by that? Because often it's not the vagina, which is the inside bit, it's on the outside and it's the labia. And Helen, I know we were going to show a diagram. Are we going to pop that up maybe in a minute?
Right, can you see that, Claire? Is that sharing?
Yes, yeah. So just super quickly. So it was really interesting in that the Guardian article. Oh, just about 40% of men and women had mislabeled the clitoris. They weren't sure where the clitoris is. So this is a bit of a gruesome diagram, but if you imagine lying on your back with your legs akimbo, what you can see is the clitoris is at the top. The urethral opening, which drains up into the bladder, is just below the clitoris. It's quite difficult to see in real life. The vestibule is sort of the general region around there, the vaginal opening and the introitus, and that's the bit often that loses the stretch. And then of the labia, the inner labia is the labia minora and the outer hairy labia is the labia majora. And that whole area incorporates the vulva. So when people say, they're talking about the vagina, often I'm finding they're talking about the labia. Thanks, Helen. And then what can then happen, sadly in a few cases, is that when sex does become painful, I don't know if you're aware, but around the vagina, there's a big ring of smooth muscle that's not under voluntary control. So if sex becomes painful, what then can happen is your brain, totally beyond your control, says, no way, and squeezes. It sort of causes the vagina to contract, and so sex again becomes either very, very painful. People say they're just feeling there's a barrier, they're feeling there's a block, they can't have penetration, and that's called vaginismus. So it's really important to try and get on top of the symptoms in the early days so they don't progress further down the line.